Well, good morning, and yes, get pissed off early. I must say that all I have to do is to open up the headlines each morning, and I can get pissed off very easily. Sometimes those people who behave in such a sophisticated manner are those that cannot see the wood for the trees. And in this particular case, I am full of disagreement with our politicians, not only our politicians, but obviously our diplomats. And not only our diplomats, but diplomats both in the United States and to some extent the rest of Europe. Although, give them fair dues, the rest of European leaders are differing on how we should handle the crisis with the Russian troops leaning over, tiptoeing towards the Ukraine border. Tiptoeing is perhaps a mild way of putting it, but they haven't yet put a step across. Now, what is our response? According to the morning newspapers and checking with the latest news through the major newsrooms, is our politicians are still saying we think we can actually reach a settlement. We think it's okay. Don't get too concerned. We're not going to go to war. Whether we go to war or not, our politicians seem to behave in a very naive manner towards things that they don't really know about and don't understand. That's okay. Politicians, and particularly our leaders, need to be briefed. They need to be given the key elements in any given crisis or situation. They can't keep an eye on everything. But those briefings seem to ignore what some of us have experienced at first hand and could easily say, if only somebody would listen, have you taken this into account? We say and we read that the Russians will find it very difficult if they go into Ukraine, that the Ukraine's population will fight to the very last nth degree. Well, their armed forces might, and I'm not belittling in any way Ukrainian people. But what we seem to have ignored is the eastern part of Ukraine feels more Russian than it does Ukrainian. Why would I say something like that? Because I've been there, not only been there, not for a fleeting visit, not for a trip from Kiev, as most diplomats do. They stay in the capital and take fleeting visits. I was there for some considerable length of time and mixed and talked to people out in the towns. My God, some of the towns you wouldn't want to live in. It's very difficult to sell the towns. It is not an ideal place. But nonetheless, I was for some time in Lugansk, which is about 12 miles from the Russian border, and I travelled extensively in that region. And what I discovered was that the people there feel closer to the Russian Federation than they do to the people in Kiev. Ukraine is split into two parts. The new Western look that embraces the EU and the old style. And when I say old, I don't necessarily mean old people. The old style approach to communism, the Russian Federation, the old Soviet Union looked after them, that the EU has not. And they think that with some justification. First of all, the EU went on a privatization program. Nothing wrong with that as long as you actually look at the environment and the situation and treat it very carefully. But they didn't. Basically, privatization was brought in because it's a principle of the European Union. And as a consequence, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people were put out of work in the steel plants and the coal mines and the other operational businesses that exist in that part of the world. They weren't very happy with what was happening, and they remembered very fondly that when it was the Soviet Union, and even when it was the early days of the Russian Federation, they were looked after, and they no longer were. So their sympathies have gone. But because they're so close to the Russian border, they also feel quite Russian. Most people in that eastern part, Donbass region, speak Russian, not Ukrainian. They feel very close to those who are now parked on their border. So the suggestion that perhaps these people will fight to the very last man is something of a misnomer. Has anybody bothered to go back there and take a look and talk to the people and how they feel? I doubt it. I expect most decisions are made in capitals based on civil servants. I'm always having a go at civil servants, and I don't mean to generalize them, but they do not seem to go into the areas that matter when it comes to sympathies, what people want and how they behave. So I wouldn't, if I was one of our leaders, put as much faith in the fact that Ukraine will resist heavily as perhaps some of our politicians are doing at the moment. Secondly, we are told that Europeans and Americans, and the Americans particularly, because they're well divorced from what's happening in Russia, in Ukraine, that will lead the defense, not with bombs and bullets, and apart from diplomacy, with sanctions. That they will make Russia pay heavily. Liz Truss is there at the moment, or was there in the last couple of days, and has been waving the flag and stamping her foot and saying, this is going to cost you. You're going to have a bad time. Economically, you will suffer. But is that true? The fact of the matter is sanctions don't work that well. Yes, we've used them successfully in places like South Africa, but that is a different kettle of fish. We have here a determined dictator, one who believes in rule of force, not rule of law. He's a tough guy, and he's also blinkered in his thinking as well, because he's KGB or ex-KGB. He thinks in the old, if I can put it this way, the old Russian way. So sanctions don't mean as much to him as they would to some other civil leader who is still trying to hang on to an economy. But the main thing is, sanctions hurt the people imposing them. If we're going to impose sanctions, what will happen is we will not be able to get some things that we need. And what springs to mind? That's been in our minds for God knows how long, in the little past history of this country, and that is gas, energy, heat. Are we prepared to gamble with that sort of sanction and bring privation to the UK, which it undoubtedly would? No, the politicians don't say much about that. But already we are feeling the squeeze, and that's before war. And if war takes place, then indeed we will be in a mess. What's the answer? I do not know. And that's why I suppose I'm able to mouth a lot, to let fly, to sit on the sidelines and yell encouragement or otherwise to the players in the field. But a good coach listens to what the spectators have to say, and our politicians do not. Not for anything, not just this, not for anything. They know what should be done, and they consistently put their foot in it, and we consistently suffer. So it will be very interesting to know if these two elements will play a significant role in any potential conflict. I'm not a warmonger. What I am saying is perhaps we should look twice before we take either, we want to call it the defense or the response or the attack on any aggression from the Russians. Let's hope they pull back. Let's hope just common sense prevails. But the evidence suggests otherwise, and the evidence suggests that we're not really prepared, and the evidence suggests that if a conflict does break out, there are many people, apart from Ukrainians, who are going to suffer. That's the morning rant. That's the morning comment. Not a very pretty picture, and I'm sorry. I wish I could paint a better one. Talk to you later. Toodle pip. Toodle pip, toodle pip, toodle pip.